In 1868, in the ancient land of Moab, a missionary discovered a stone buried nearly 3,000 years beneath the earth. On that stone was a victory declaration from an ancient king, and a name that appears only 6 times in the entire Bible. But here is what makes this strange. This man once bought an entire hill for just 2 talents of silver. No army and no empire, just a nameless hill in the middle of the valley of Samaria. Then he turned that place into one of the most feared fortresses in the ancient world. He named his new capital Samaria after the former owner of the land, Shemer. But the true power of this place was not in its name. The hill stood nearly 300 feet above the surrounding land, with slopes so steep they were almost impossible to attack head-on. From the top, soldiers could spot the enemy from miles away before they ever got close. 3,000 years later, archaeologists are still debating the scale of the defense system he built on that hill. And the most terrifying part is, the conquerors who came after him nearly erased his name from history to rewrite the glory as their own. The name carved on that stone was Omri, the forgotten king of ancient Israel. Today you're going to discover why the world remembered this man when the Bible almost forgot him. We're going through the complete history of the House of Omri, from rise to total destruction. Now here is what makes this story so fascinating. The Assyrian Empire, the most dominant force in the ancient world at that time, called Israel Bit Humria. That literally translates to the House of Omri, and they didn't stop using that name after he died. They kept calling Israel by his name for over 100 years after his entire family was wiped from the earth. The Moabite king who carved that stone didn't mention David or Solomon on his monument. He mentioned Omri because Omri was the king who conquered his land and crushed his people for decades. So how did a man with only 6 verses in the Bible build something this big? He built an entirely new capital city from nothing on top of a hill called Samaria. His army sent one of the largest chariot forces in the ancient world to fight against Assyria. And his family brought the darkest spiritual evil Israel had ever seen. Because it was the House of Omri that gave Israel its most wicked king and queen, Ahab and Jezebel, 2 names that the Bible remembers with more disgust than almost any other. And God sent Elijah, and then Elisha, and then a commander named Jehu to end them all. Every king, every war, every prophecy, and every judgment. This is the most powerful dynasty in Israel that almost nobody knows about. Let's get into it. To understand how Omri came to power, you need to see what Israel looked like before him. And it was a complete mess. After King Solomon died, his kingdom did not hold together. The people came to Solomon's son Rehoboam and begged him to lighten the heavy labor his father had placed on them. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders and listened to his young friends instead. He stood before the people and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." When the people heard those words, 10 tribes turned their backs on the house of David forever. They broke away and formed the northern kingdom, which kept the name Israel. Only Judah and Benjamin stayed with Rehoboam in the south, with Jerusalem as their capital. Now the northern kingdom was bigger, richer, and had more people than the south. It controlled more land, more trade routes, and more farmland than the kingdom of Judah. But it had one massive problem that would haunt it for the rest of its existence. It had no stable leadership. The very first king of the north was a man named Jeroboam. God himself actually chose this man and gave him 10 tribes through a prophet named Ahijah. The prophet found Jeroboam on a road outside Jerusalem and tore his own cloak into 12 pieces. He handed 10 pieces to Jeroboam and said, "God is tearing the kingdom from Solomon and giving 10 tribes to you." But Jeroboam was terrified that his people would travel south to Jerusalem to worship at the temple. He feared that if they kept going back to the house of David, they would eventually turn against him. So he made 2 golden calves out of metal, set one in the city of Bethel and one in the city of Dan. He placed them before the people and said, "Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." He built shrines on high places, appointed priests who were not from the tribe of Levi, and created his own festivals. From that moment on, the northern kingdom was spiritually broken at its very foundation. And every single king who came after Jeroboam followed that exact sin. Jeroboam ruled for 22 years, and when he died, his son Nadab took the throne. Nadab walked in the ways of his father, did evil in the sight of the Lord, and kept the golden calves standing. He lasted only 2 years before a man named Baasha from the tribe of Issachar conspired against him. Baasha struck Nadab down while the army was besieging a Philistine city called Gibbethon. And then Baasha did something that set a dark pattern for the northern kingdom. He hunted down every single living relative of Jeroboam and killed them all. Men, women, anyone connected to the royal bloodline. He left no one breathing. This was exactly what God had warned through the prophet Ahijah, that Jeroboam's house would be completely cut off. Now Baasha sat on the throne of Israel, but he was no better than the man he replaced. God sent a prophet named Jehu, son of Hanani, to deliver the same warning he had given Jeroboam. "I lifted you out of the dust and made you ruler over my people Israel, but you have walked in the way of Jeroboam. I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam. I will wipe out every last one of your descendants." Baasha died, and his son Elah became king of Israel. Elah was not a warrior, and he was not a leader. While his army was out fighting the Philistines at Gibbethon, the same city where his father killed Nadab, Elah stayed behind. He was in the house of a man named Arza, who managed the palace in the capital city of Tirzah. And he was drinking, getting himself drunk, while his soldiers bled on the battlefield. That is when Zimri made his move. Then, just like Baasha had done to the house of Jeroboam, Zimri destroyed the entire house of Baasha. He killed every male relative, every friend, every ally. He left no one alive. 2 dynasties now, wiped out in the exact same way for the exact same sin. But here is where it gets interesting. Zimri sat on the throne of Israel for exactly 7 days. 7 days. The shortest reign of any king in the entire Bible. Because when the army of Israel heard what Zimri had done, they refused to accept him as king. They were still camped at Gibbethon, besieging that same Philistine city, and they made their own decision. The soldiers chose the man they trusted most. His name was Omri. When Omri marched his army from Gibbethon toward the capital city of Tirzah, Zimri saw them coming. He stood in the palace and watched the dust rising from thousands of soldiers moving toward the gates. He knew there was no way out, no negotiation, no surrender that would save his life. So Zimri walked into the inner room of the royal palace, set the whole building on fire around him, and burned himself alive. The palace of the kings of Israel collapsed in flames, and Zimri died inside the ruins. But even then, the chaos was not over. Omri was not the only one who wanted the throne. A man named Tibni, son of Ginath, also claimed the right to be king of Israel. The nation split into 2 factions. Half followed Omri, and half followed Tibni. For the next few years, Israel was at war with itself, brother against brother, army against army. The Bible does not give us the details of every battle, but it tells us clearly how it ended. Tibni died, and Omri became the undisputed king of all Israel. He didn't inherit the throne from his father. He didn't receive it from a prophet or a promise from God. He took it through military strength, political will, and the loyalty of his soldiers. And from this moment on, everything about the northern kingdom was about to change. Omri was now king, but the kingdom he inherited was falling apart. 4 kings before him had been murdered or died in disgrace. The capital city of Tirzah was half burned from Zimri's fire. The nation had just come through a civil war, the army was exhausted, and the people were divided. Any ordinary ruler would have spent his reign just trying to hold things together. But Omri was not an ordinary ruler. The first thing he did was something no king of Israel had ever done before. He bought an entire hill from a man named Shema for 2 talents of silver. And on that hill, he built a brand new capital city from the ground up. He named it Samaria after the man who sold him the land. The hill of Samaria sat about 300 feet above the surrounding valley. It had steep slopes on every side, making it almost impossible to attack. You could see enemy armies coming from miles away in every direction. It was surrounded by fertile land, connected to major trade routes, and close enough to the coast to access Phoenician ports. Omri did not just pick a nice location, he picked the most strategic position in the entire northern kingdom. And he didn't just build a fortress, he built a city that would rival Jerusalem. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of Omri's palace complex in Samaria. The walls were thick, the buildings were made of fine-cut stone, and the layout showed careful planning. This was not a rushed construction by a desperate king trying to find a new home. This was a man building something that was meant to last for generations. But Omri understood that military strength alone would not keep his kingdom safe. Israel was surrounded by enemies on every side. The Arameans of Syria pressed from the north, the Moabites pushed from the east, and the Philistines threatened from the west. Judah, the southern kingdom ruled by the House of David, was not exactly friendly either. So Omri did what no Israelite king had done so boldly before. He made alliances through diplomacy, and his most important alliance was with the Phoenicians. Phoenicia was the great trading civilization of the ancient world. An alliance with Phoenicia meant wealth, trade, and access to the entire Mediterranean world. Omri sealed this alliance the way ancient kings always did, through marriage. He arranged for his son Ahab to marry a Phoenician princess from the city of Sidon. Her name was Jezebel, the daughter of King Ethbaal. Now, politically, this was a brilliant move. It gave Israel access to Phoenician wealth, Phoenician trade, and Phoenician military support. It made the northern kingdom stronger and richer than it had been since the days of Solomon. But spiritually, this was the worst decision any king of Israel would ever make. Because Jezebel did not come alone. She brought her gods with her. The kingdom of Moab, across the Jordan River to the east, had been a thorn in Israel's side for generations. Omri crushed them. He invaded Moab, conquered their territory, and forced them to pay tribute to Israel. The Moabite king had to send enormous amounts of wool and livestock to Samaria every single year. And we know this not just from the Bible, but from the Moabites themselves. That stone discovered in 1868, the Mesha Stele, was carved by King Mesha of Moab. And on that stone, Mesha wrote that Omri, king of Israel, humiliated Moab for many days. He described how Omri took their land, occupied their cities, and made them suffer under Israelite rule. This was a king who built a new capital, forged international alliances, crushed neighboring kingdoms, and turned Israel into a power that the ancient world could not ignore. In just 12 years on the throne, Omri transformed the northern kingdom from a broken and divided nation into a force that rivaled anything in the region. And when Omri died, he passed all of this, the city, the alliances, the military, the wealth, to his son. A son who would take his father's kingdom to even greater heights, but also drag it into darker evil than Israel had ever known. Ahab, the son of Omri, was about to sit on the throne, and beside him, the Phoenician princess Jezebel. Omri built Samaria, crushed Moab, and allied with Phoenicia. His son Ahab inherited all of that and pushed it even further. By the time Ahab was on the throne, Israel had one of the strongest militaries in the entire region. We know this because of a battle that the Bible never even mentions. In 853 BC, the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III marched his army westward toward the Mediterranean. He was the most powerful ruler on earth at that time, and his goal was to conquer everything in his path. The smaller kingdoms in the region knew that none of them could face Assyria alone. So they did something rare in the ancient world. They formed a coalition. 12 kings brought their armies together to meet Assyria at a place called Karkar, near the Orontes River in modern-day Syria. And among those 12 kings was Ahab, son of Omri, king of Israel. The Assyrian records, carved into stone by Shalmaneser himself, list exactly what each king brought to the battle. The king of Damascus brought 1,200 chariots, 1,200 cavalry, and 20,000 foot soldiers. The king of Hamath brought 700 chariots, 700 cavalry, and 10,000 foot soldiers. And Ahab, king of Israel, brought 2,000 chariots and 10,000 foot soldiers. 2,000 chariots. That was the single largest chariot force of any king in the entire coalition. More than Damascus, more than Hamath, more than any of the other 11 kingdoms combined. In the ancient world, chariots were the most expensive and most devastating weapon on the battlefield. Maintaining 2,000 of them required enormous wealth, massive stables, thousands of trained horses, and skilled warriors to drive them. This was not a poor little kingdom hiding in the hills. This was a military superpower by the standards of the ancient Near East. And the Assyrians knew it. That is why, long after Omri and Ahab were dead, Assyria still called Israel by the name Bit Humria. On the black obelisk of Shalmaneser, a monument that still exists today in the British Museum in London, Israel is referred to as the House of Omri. On multiple Assyrian inscriptions across different decades and different kings, the name never changed. Israel was Omri's kingdom in the eyes of the ancient world. Even King Jehu, who would later destroy the entire House of Omri and kill every member of the family, was called the son of Omri in Assyrian records. He had no blood connection to Omri at all, but Assyria didn't care. To them, whoever sat on the throne of Samaria was a son of Omri, because Omri was the one who put Israel on the map. But power without God is a dangerous thing. And everything the House of Omri built was about to be poisoned from the inside. Because sitting on the throne next to Ahab was a woman who wanted to remake Israel in the image of her own gods. And she was willing to kill anyone who stood in her way. When Ahab took the throne from his father Omri, he inherited everything a king could want. A fortified capital, a powerful army, wealthy alliances, and a kingdom that the nations around him respected and feared. But the Bible says something devastating about Ahab in just one sentence. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any king before him. More than Jeroboam, who built the golden calves. More than Baasha, who slaughtered an entire royal family. More than every wicked king who had sat on the throne of Israel before him. And the Bible tells us exactly why. It was not enough for Ahab to follow the sins of Jeroboam. He treated that as a light thing. He then married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. And from the moment Jezebel set foot in Samaria, everything changed. Jezebel was not just a foreign wife. She was the daughter of a priest king who had murdered his own brother to take the throne of Sidon. She grew up in a culture that worshipped Baal, the Canaanite god of storms and fertility and prosperity. And she did not come to Israel to adopt the God of Israel. She came to replace him. Jezebel convinced Ahab to build a temple to Baal right in the heart of Samaria, the capital city itself. Not on the outskirts, not hidden away, but at the center of power where everyone could see it. Ahab set up an altar inside the temple and erected an Asherah pole beside it. The worship of Baal was no longer something happening in the shadows or on the hilltops. It was now the official religion of the royal court of Israel. But Jezebel did not stop at building temples. She wanted Baal to be the only god worshipped in all of Israel. And that meant the prophets of the Lord had to be silenced. Jezebel launched a campaign to hunt down and kill every prophet of the true God she could find. She sent soldiers to find them, drag them from their homes, and execute them. The prophets of the living God were hiding in caves, surviving on bread and water, while the prophets of Baal ate at Jezebel's table. The Bible says Jezebel personally fed and supported 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. that is 850 pagan prophets living in luxury under the queen's protection, while God's people lived in fear of death. Israel had never fallen this far. And then there is the story that reveals the true heart of Ahab and Jezebel more than any other. The story of a man named Naboth. Naboth owned a vineyard in the city of Jezreel, right next to the king's palace. Ahab looked out his window one day and saw that vineyard, and he wanted it for himself. He went to Naboth and offered to buy it or trade it for a better piece of land. But Naboth refused. "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers," Naboth said. In Israel, land was not just property, it was a family's God-given inheritance passed down through generations. Selling it to the king would mean giving up what God himself had given to his family. Naboth was not being stubborn, he was being faithful. But Ahab went back to his palace and threw himself on his bed like a child. He turned his face to the wall and refused to eat. The king of Israel, the most powerful man in the kingdom, was sulking because a farmer said no. And that is when Jezebel stepped in. She looked at her husband and said, "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth." Jezebel wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his royal seal, and sent them to the elders of Jezreel. In those letters, she gave specific instructions. Proclaim a day of fasting, set Naboth in a high place before the people, and then seat 2 worthless men across from him. Have them accuse Naboth of cursing God and cursing the king. Then take him outside the city and stone him to death. And the elders of Jezreel did exactly what the queen commanded. They held the assembly, they brought in the false witnesses, and they accused Naboth of blasphemy. The people dragged Naboth outside the city walls and stoned him with rocks until he was dead. An innocent man, killed for his vineyard because the queen wanted to please the king. When Jezebel heard that Naboth was dead, she went to Ahab with a smile. "Get up and take possession of the vineyard," she told him. "Naboth is no longer alive." Ahab got up from his bed, walked to the vineyard, and claimed it as his own. He stepped onto the land that was still stained with an innocent man's blood, and he took it without shame. But God saw everything. And God was about to send a man to the vineyard to meet Ahab face to face. A man that Ahab feared more than any army, more than any enemy king, more than anyone on earth. The prophet Elijah. The first time Elijah stepped into the story, he walked straight into Ahab's court and said something no one expected. "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." No introduction, no warning, no negotiation. Just a man standing in front of the most powerful king in Israel and shutting the sky. And the sky shut. For 3.5 years, not a single drop of rain fell on the land of Israel. The rivers dried up, the crops withered, the livestock starved, and the people suffered. Jezebel had promised the nation that Baal was the god of rain and storms and harvest. But Baal could not send a single cloud. Meanwhile, God told Elijah to hide by a brook called Cherith, east of the Jordan River. He drank from the brook, and God sent ravens to bring him bread and meat every morning and every evening. When the brook dried up, God sent Elijah north to a town called Zarephath in the land of Sidon. That is Jezebel's homeland, the very territory where Baal was supposed to rule. In Zarephath, Elijah met a widow who was gathering sticks to cook one last meal for herself and her son. She told Elijah, "I have nothing but a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering 2 sticks to prepare the last meal for me and my son, and then we will die." Elijah told her, "Do not be afraid. Go and make me a small cake first, and then make something for yourself and your son. For the Lord, the God of Israel, says the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day rain falls on this land." The widow obeyed, and from that day on, the flour never ran out, and the oil never went dry. God was feeding his prophet in the backyard of Baal's own territory, while Baal could do nothing. After 3.5 years of drought, God told Elijah it was time to go back. "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." Elijah returned, and when Ahab saw him, the king's first words were full of blame. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Ahab said. Elijah did not flinch. "I have not troubled Israel," he answered, "but you and your father's house have, because you have abandoned the commands of the Lord and followed the Baals." And then Elijah issued a challenge that would determine the future of the entire nation. "Summon the people of Israel to meet me at Mount Carmel," he said, "and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel, and the people gathered on the slopes of Mount Carmel. On one side stood 850 pagan prophets, backed by the queen's power and the king's authority. On the other side stood one man, alone, with nothing but the word of God. Elijah stood before the crowd and spoke directly to the people. "How long will you waver between two opinions?" he said. "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people said nothing, not a single word. So Elijah proposed a test. "Let the prophets of Baal prepare a bull and lay it on an altar, but put no fire to it. I will prepare another bull and lay it on an altar, and I will put no fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." The people agreed. The prophets of Baal went first. They prepared their bull, laid it on the altar, and began calling on Baal from morning until noon. "O Baal, answer us," they cried, dancing around the altar, shouting and pleading. But there was no response, no voice, no fire, nothing. At noon, Elijah began to mock them. "Shout louder," he said. "Perhaps your God is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." The prophets screamed louder, slashing themselves with swords and spears until blood poured down their bodies. They raved and cried and cut themselves all afternoon, from noon until the time of the evening sacrifice. But still there was no response, no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah called the people closer. "Come near to me," he said, and the crowd moved in. He rebuilt the altar of the Lord that had been torn down, using 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. He dug a trench around the altar wide enough to hold 2 measures of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the altar. And then he did something that made no sense at all. Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. They poured water until it ran down the altar and filled the trench completely. The sacrifice, the wood, the stones, everything was soaking wet. Then Elijah stepped forward and prayed. "Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel. Let it be known that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God." And fire fell from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil. When the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground. "The Lord, he is God," they cried out. "The Lord, he is God." Elijah commanded them to seize the prophets of Baal, every single one of them. They dragged them down to the Kishon Valley below Mount Carmel, and Elijah had them all executed. All 450 prophets of Baal killed in one day. Then Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, crouched down on the ground, and put his face between his knees. He told his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant went and came back and said, "There is nothing." Elijah said, "Go again." 7 times he sent the servant to look. On the 7th time, the servant said, "There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." Elijah said, "Go tell Ahab to hitch up his chariot and ride down before the rain stops him." The sky grew black with clouds and wind, and a heavy rain poured down on the land of Israel. After 3.5 years of silence, God opened the heavens and the drought was over. Ahab rode his chariot through the storm back to the city of Jezreel. And the Bible says the hand of the Lord came on Elijah, and he ran ahead of the chariot all the way to Jezreel. A prophet outrunning a chariot in the middle of a storm, powered by nothing but the hand of God. But when Ahab arrived home and told Jezebel everything that had happened on Mount Carmel, she was not afraid. She was furious. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah with one sentence: "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of those prophets." The man who had just called fire from heaven and outrun a chariot was now terrified of one woman. Elijah ran for his life into the wilderness south of Beersheba. He sat down under a broom tree, exhausted and broken, and prayed for death. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." He fell asleep, and an angel touched him. "Get up and eat," the angel said, "for the journey is too much for you." Elijah looked and found bread baked on hot coals and a jar of water beside his head. He ate and drank, then lay down again. The angel came a second time and said, "Get up and eat, because the journey ahead is long." Elijah ate, and in the strength of that food he traveled 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the same mountain where God had spoken to Moses hundreds of years before. There, in a cave on the mountain, God spoke to Elijah. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah poured out his heart. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty," he said. "The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." God told Elijah to go and stand on the mountain, for the Lord was about to pass by. A great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper, a still small voice. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and stood at the mouth of the cave. And God gave him his final mission: "Go back the way you came and anoint Hazael as king over Syria. Anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, as prophet to take your place." 3 anointings, 3 instruments of judgment against the House of Omri. God was not finished with this dynasty yet, but the end had already been decided. Elijah walked down from the mountain, carrying the names of the men who would tear the House of Omri apart. While Elijah was fighting the spiritual war against Baal, Ahab was fighting real wars on the battlefield. And whatever you think of him as a man of faith, on the battlefield Ahab was a dangerous king. The biggest threat to Israel at that time was the kingdom of Aram, ruled from Damascus by a king named Ben-Hadad. Ben-Hadad gathered 32 kings, marched on Samaria, and sent Ahab a brutal demand: "Your silver and gold are mine, your best wives and children are mine." Ahab agreed at first, knowing he was outnumbered. But then Ben-Hadad pushed further, demanding to send his men to ransack the palace and the houses of every official. That was when Ahab refused, and Ben-Hadad declared war. He boasted from his tent that he would turn Samaria into dust. Ahab fired back with one of the sharpest lines any king in the Bible ever spoke: "One who puts on his armor should not boast like one who takes it off." But God was not done with Israel. A prophet came to Ahab and promised victory. And while Ben-Hadad and his 32 allied kings were getting drunk in their tents, Ahab's army struck. 232 young officers led the attack at noon, and the Aramean army panicked and fled. Ben-Hadad himself barely escaped on horseback. The prophet warned Ahab Ben-Hadad would attack again next spring. And he did. The 2 armies camped opposite each other near a place called Aphek. The Bible describes the scene like this: the Israelites looked like 2 small flocks of goats, while the Arameans covered the countryside. For 7 days they faced each other. On the 7th day, the battle began. The Israelites killed 100,000 Aramean soldiers in a single day. The survivors fled into the city of Aphek, where the city wall collapsed on 27,000 more. Ben-Hadad ran into the city and hid in an inner room. His officials came to him and said, "We have heard the kings of Israel are merciful kings. Let us go to Ahab and beg for your life." They went to Ahab in sackcloth, with ropes around their necks. Ahab's response stunned everyone. "Is he still alive? He is my brother." He invited Ben-Hadad up into his chariot, made a treaty, and let him go. The king who threatened to turn Samaria to dust was riding home alive because Ahab chose political alliance over God's command. A prophet confronted Ahab on the road. "This is what the Lord says. You have set free a man I had determined should die. Therefore, it is your life for his life." Ahab went back to Samaria, sullen and angry, just like he had done after Naboth refused to sell his vineyard. The pattern was always the same. He won battles, he gained power, but every time God gave him a command, he did what he wanted instead. And there was one more battle left, the one that would cost him everything. 3 years passed after the treaty with Ben-Hadad, but there was a city that still burned in Ahab's mind: Ramoth Gilead. It was an Israelite city east of the Jordan River that the Arameans had taken and never given back. Even after the treaty, even after Ahab spared Ben-Hadad's life, the Arameans kept Ramoth Gilead. Ahab wanted it back. He invited Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, to come to Samaria and discuss a joint military campaign. Jehoshaphat was a good king, a man who followed God, and he agreed to come. When he arrived, Ahab laid out his plan. "Will you go with me to attack Ramoth Gilead?" Ahab asked. Jehoshaphat said, "I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses." But then he added something Ahab did not want to hear. "First, seek the counsel of the Lord." So Ahab gathered 400 prophets. He asked them, "Shall I go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain?" Every single one of them said the same thing: "Go, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand." One of them, a man named Zedekiah, even made iron horns and held them up before the court. "With these you will gore the Arameans until they are destroyed," he declared. But Jehoshaphat was not convinced. He looked around the room at 400 prophets, all saying exactly what the king wanted to hear. "Is there not a prophet of the Lord here whom we can inquire of?" he asked. Ahab's face changed. "There is one more," he said, "but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good about me, only bad. His name is Micaiah, son of Imlah." Jehoshaphat said, "The king should not say such things. Let us hear him." A messenger was sent to bring Micaiah, and on the way the messenger gave him advice. "Look, the other prophets are all predicting success for the king. Let your word agree with theirs and speak favorably." Micaiah replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, I can tell him only what the Lord tells me." When he arrived before the two kings, Ahab asked him the same question: "Shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead or not?" Micaiah, perhaps with a tone that everyone in the room could detect, said, "Attack and be victorious, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand." The exact same words the 400 prophets had said, but Ahab knew something was wrong. "How many times must I make you swear to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?" Ahab demanded. Then Micaiah spoke what God had actually shown him. "I saw all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd," he said. "And the Lord said, 'These people have no master. Let each one go home in peace.'" Ahab turned to Jehoshaphat and said, "Did I not tell you that he never prophesies anything good about me?" But Micaiah was not finished. He described a vision of the throne room of heaven. "I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the heavenly host standing around him on his right and his left. And the Lord said, 'Who will entice Ahab into attacking Ramoth Gilead and going to his death there?' One spirit came forward and said, 'I will entice him by being a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets.' The Lord said, 'Go and do it. You will succeed.'" Micaiah looked directly at Ahab and said, "The Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you." The prophet Zedekiah walked up and slapped Micaiah across the face. "Which way did the Spirit from the Lord go when he went from me to speak to you?" he mocked. Micaiah answered calmly, "You will find out on the day you go to hide in an inner room." Ahab had heard enough. "Put this man in prison," he ordered, "and give him nothing but bread and water until I return safely." Micaiah said one last thing as the guards dragged him away. "If you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me." Then he raised his voice so everyone in the court could hear. "Mark my words, all you people." Ahab ignored the warning and marched to war, but he was not stupid, and he was not without fear. He came up with a plan to cheat death. He told Jehoshaphat, "I will enter the battle in disguise, but you wear your royal robes." He put the king of Judah in royal clothing so the enemy would target him instead. And he dressed himself as an ordinary soldier so no one would recognize him on the battlefield. The king of Aram had given his chariot commanders one specific order: "Do not fight with anyone, small or great, except the king of Israel." When the Aramean commanders saw Jehoshaphat in his royal robes, they turned and chased him. "This must be the king of Israel," they shouted, surrounding his chariot. But when Jehoshaphat cried out, they realized he was not the one they were looking for, and they pulled away. Ahab thought he was safe, hidden in the chaos of battle, dressed as a common soldier. But a single Aramean soldier, the Bible says he drew his bow at random, pulled back the string, and let an arrow fly. It was not aimed at anyone in particular, just a shot fired into the mass of soldiers. That arrow found the one gap in Ahab's armor, between the sections of his breastplate, and sank deep into his body. The king slumped in his chariot and told his chariot driver, "Turn around and get me out of the fighting. I have been wounded." But the battle raged on all day long, and Ahab could not leave. He was propped up in his chariot, facing the Arameans, while blood poured from his wound and pooled on the floor of the chariot. He stayed there all day, watching his soldiers fight, slowly bleeding to death in the afternoon sun. By evening, the king was dead. A cry went through the army, every man to his town, every man to his land. The army scattered, just as Micaiah had said, like sheep without a shepherd. They brought Ahab's body back to Samaria and buried him there. And when they washed the chariot at the pool of Samaria, the dogs came and licked up his blood. The Bible makes sure you know this detail because years earlier, after Naboth was murdered for his vineyard, Elijah had looked Ahab in the eyes and told him exactly this. "In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood." Word for word, it came true. The most powerful king the northern kingdom of Israel had ever seen was dead. After Ahab's death, the House of Omri did not end. The dynasty still held the throne, and Jezebel still held the power behind it. Ahab's son, Ahaziah, became king of Israel, but his reign was short and miserable. He fell through the lattice of his upper room in Samaria and was seriously injured. Instead of calling on the God of Israel, he sent messengers to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of the Philistine city of Ekron. But God intercepted them on the road. Elijah met the messengers and delivered God's verdict. "Because you have sent to inquire of Baal-zebub, you will never leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die." When Ahaziah heard the message, he sent soldiers to bring Elijah by force. But fire fell from heaven and consumed them. Ahaziah died exactly as Elijah had spoken. He had no son, so the throne passed to his brother Joram, the last king of the House of Omri. But something else was happening at the same time. Elijah's time was coming to an end, and his successor had already been chosen. A farmer named Elisha had been following Elijah ever since the day the prophet threw his cloak over him in the field. On the day God took Elijah home, the two prophets walked together to the Jordan River. Elijah took his cloak, struck the water, and the river split in two. They crossed on dry ground, and on the other side Elijah turned to Elisha. "What can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha answered, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." As they were walking, a chariot of fire appeared, pulled by horses of fire. A whirlwind lifted Elijah up into the sky. Elisha cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Then he picked up Elijah's cloak from the ground. He walked back to the Jordan, struck the water, and said, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The water split again, and Elisha crossed on dry ground. The mantle had passed, and with it the mission God had given to Elijah on Mount Horeb. The House of Omri was weakening, but it had not yet fallen. Elisha watched and waited, because God had set a date for the House of Omri. And when that date arrived, he would send the man who would end it all, a commander in the army named Jehu. Elisha called one of the young prophets from the company of prophets and gave him a flask of oil. He told him, "Tuck your cloak into your belt, take this flask, and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you get there, find Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi. Take him away from his companions into an inner room. Pour this oil on his head and say, 'This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and run. Do not delay." The young prophet did exactly as Elisha instructed. He traveled to Ramoth Gilead, where the army of Israel was stationed. When he arrived, he found Jehu sitting with the other military commanders. "Commander, I have a message for you," the young prophet said. Jehu asked, "For which of us?" The prophet said, "For you, Commander." Jehu stood up and followed him into an inner room. The young prophet poured the oil over Jehu's head and delivered the message from God. "I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. You are to destroy the house of Ahab your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants the prophets. I will avenge the blood of all the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish. I will cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam and like the house of Baasha. As for Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground at Jezreel, and no one will bury her." Then the young prophet opened the door and ran, just as Elisha had told him. Jehu walked back out to the other commanders, and they could see something had changed. "Is everything all right?" they asked. "Why did this madman come to you?" Jehu tried to brush it off. "You know the man and the sort of things he says, but they pressed him. That is not true. Tell us." So Jehu told them everything. The reaction was instant. Every commander in the room took off his cloak and spread it under Jehu on the bare steps. They blew the trumpet and shouted, "Jehu is king." There was no debate, no hesitation, no discussion. The military commanders of Israel chose Jehu on the spot. Jehu wasted no time. He ordered that no one leave the city of Ramoth Gilead to warn anyone in Jezreel. Then he climbed into his chariot and rode toward the city of Jezreel, where King Joram was recovering from battle wounds. Now Joram, the last king of the House of Omri, had been wounded fighting the Arameans at Ramoth Gilead. 2 kings in one city, both connected to the House of Omri by blood and by alliance. A watchman on the tower of Jezreel spotted Jehu's company approaching in the distance. "I see a group of men coming," he reported. Joram sent a horseman to meet them. The rider reached Jehu and asked, "Do you come in peace?" Jehu answered, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." The horseman did not return. A second horseman was sent with the same question. Jehu gave the same answer. The second horseman did not return either. The watchman called down to the king again. "The messenger has reached them but is not coming back," he said. "And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, son of Nimshi. He drives like a madman." Joram knew something was terribly wrong. He ordered his chariot to be hitched up, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, did the same. The 2 kings rode out of the city to meet Jehu, and they met him at the field of Naboth the Jezreelite, the same plot of land where an innocent man had been murdered for his vineyard by Jezebel's scheme. When Joram saw Jehu, he called out, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" Jehu shouted back, "How can there be peace as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" Joram pulled his reins to turn his chariot around and screamed to Ahaziah, "Treachery, Ahaziah!" But it was too late. Jehu drew his bow with full strength and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and the king slumped dead in his chariot. Jehu turned to his officer Bidkar and said, "Pick him up and throw him on the field of Naboth. Yesterday I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, declares the Lord. I will surely make you pay for it on this plot of ground. Now pick him up and throw him on the plot in accordance with the word of the Lord." Joram's body was thrown onto Naboth's field. The last king of the House of Omri, dead on the exact piece of land that his mother had stolen through murder. Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw what happened and fled toward the town of Beth Hagan. Jehu pursued him and ordered his men to shoot him too. They wounded Ahaziah in his chariot, and he escaped as far as Megiddo, where he died. Jehu then rode into the city of Jezreel, and Jezebel knew he was coming. She had heard that her son Joram was dead. She had heard that Jehu had killed the king of Judah. She knew what was about to happen, but Jezebel did not run, and she did not beg. She painted her eyes, arranged her hair, and looked down from a window as Jehu entered the gate. When she saw him, she called down with venom in her voice, "Have you come in peace, you Zimri, you murderer of your master?" She called him Zimri, the man who had killed a king and lasted only 7 days before burning himself alive. It was a threat and an insult wrapped in one sentence. Jehu looked up at the window and shouted, "Who is on my side?" "Who?" 2 or 3 palace servants appeared at the window beside Jezebel. "Throw her down," Jehu commanded. They grabbed the queen and threw her from the window. Her body hit the ground, and her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses below. Jehu rode his chariot over her body and went inside the palace to eat and drink. After he had finished his meal, he said to his servants, "Take care of that cursed woman and bury her, for she was a king's daughter." But when the servants went out to find her body, there was almost nothing left. The dogs had eaten her flesh. All they found were her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. The servants came back and told Jehu, and he said, "This is the word of the Lord that he spoke through his servant Elijah. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. Her body will be like dung on the surface of the field, so that no one will be able to say, 'Here lies Jezebel.'" But Jehu was not finished. Ahab had 70 sons living in the city of Samaria, raised by the nobles and officials of the kingdom. Jehu sent letters to the leaders of Samaria with a challenge. "Your master's sons are with you, and you have chariots and horses, a fortified city and weapons. Choose the best and most worthy of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house." The leaders of Samaria were terrified. "If 2 kings could not resist him, how can we?" they said. They sent word back to Jehu, "We are your servants and will do anything you say. We will not appoint anyone as king." Jehu sent a second letter. "If you are on my side and will obey me, take the heads of your master's sons and come to me at Jezreel by this time tomorrow." The officials of Samaria took the 70 sons of Ahab and killed every single one of them. They put their heads in baskets and sent them to Jehu at Jezreel. When the messenger arrived and told Jehu the heads had come, Jehu gave an order: "Put them in 2 piles at the entrance of the city gate until morning." The next morning, Jehu went out and stood before all the people of Jezreel. He pointed to the 2 piles of 70 heads stacked at the gate. "You are innocent," he said to the crowd. "It was I who conspired against my master and killed him, but who killed all these? The Lord has done what he announced through his servant Elijah." Then Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained loyal to the house of Ahab, every official, every close friend, every priest connected to the royal family. He left no one alive. And there was still one more act of destruction. Jehu announced to all of Samaria, that he would hold a great assembly for Baal. Ahab served Baal a little, Jehu told the people, but Jehu will serve him much more. The worshippers of Baal gathered from all over Israel and packed into the temple of Baal in Samaria. Then Jehu posted 80 men outside the building and gave them one command: "If any man escapes, the one who lets him go will pay with his own life." The soldiers went in with swords and cut down every single person inside the temple of Baal. They dragged out the sacred stone of Baal and burned it. They tore down the temple of Baal and turned the site into a latrine. The worship of Baal in the northern kingdom was destroyed in a single day. The House of Omri was gone, every last member dead. Jezebel was eaten by dogs. Joram was thrown on Naboth's field, and 70 heads sat in piles at the city gate. God had said through Elijah that this would happen. Every word, every detail, every judgment came true exactly as the prophet had spoken. The most powerful dynasty in the history of the northern kingdom ended not with a whisper, but with blood and fire and 70 heads in baskets. The House of Omri was gone. Every king, every prince, every relative, all dead. Jezebel's body was scattered like dung on the ground at Jezreel. The temple of Baal in Samaria was torn apart and turned into a public toilet. By every measure, this dynasty had been completely erased from the land of Israel, but the name refused to die. After Jehu took the throne, the Assyrian Empire kept calling Israel by Omri's name. On the black obelisk, which still stands today in the British Museum, even Jehu, the man who slaughtered Omri's family, is identified as a son of Omri. A man who ruled for only 12 years left a mark so deep that it outlasted his entire bloodline by over a century. The same was true on the Mesha stela. Even when King Mesha of Moab broke free from Israel and carved his victory in stone, he still wrote Omri's name on it. The king who defeated Israel still defined his triumph by the man who had once conquered him. That is how powerful the House of Omri was in the eyes of the world. But the Bible measured them by a completely different standard. The Bible does not celebrate Omri's military conquests or his political alliances. It gives him 6 verses and says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord and sinned more than all those before him. The Bible does not remember Ahab for his chariot army. It remembers Naboth's vineyard and the dogs that licked Ahab's blood. It does not remember Jezebel for her royal influence. It remembers the prophets she murdered. The world measured the House of Omri by their power. God measured them by their faithfulness, and by that standard, they were the worst dynasty Israel had ever seen. Every promise of judgment came true. Ahab's blood licked by dogs, fulfilled. Jezebel eaten by dogs at Jezreel, fulfilled. The house of Ahab destroyed like the house of Jeroboam, fulfilled. Not one word fell to the ground. You can build the most powerful kingdom in the region and still be completely rejected by God. You can silence every prophet and fill the land with foreign gods, but the word of the Lord will still come true, every single time. The House of Omri lasted roughly 50 years across 4 kings: Omri, Ahab, Ahaziah, and Joram. In that time, they built a new capital city, crushed the kingdom of Moab, allied with Phoenicia, and fielded the largest chariot army in the Western world. Foreign nations bowed to them, paid tribute to them, and remembered their name long after they were gone. But they also brought Israel to its lowest spiritual point in history. God sent Elijah to warn them, and they tried to kill him. God gave them victory on the battlefield, and they gave the credit to Baal. So God sent Jehu. And in a single wave of blood and fire, the most powerful dynasty in the northern kingdom was erased. But the name Omri echoed through the ancient world for another 100 years. Carved into stone by Assyrian kings, written on monuments by Moabite rulers, and buried in the ground for archaeologists to find thousands of years later. And that is the story of the House of Omri, the most powerful dynasty in Israel that almost nobody knows about, until now.